Welcome to Unfiltered Finance. I'm your host, Emily Turner, and Maaize is joining us today from 1 million to 100 million in 15 years portfolio. Did I get that name right? It's longer than that,
1
right?
million to 100 million portfolio project or 1 to
That's it.
100 million portfolio project.
That's right. And we did an interview about how you are working to do that, which everybody can check out in the channel below. But one of the things you do in that project is you pick maybe smaller cap companies and that but have huge earning potential. And we're going to talk about one of those in particular, and it's a nicotine pouch company. How in the world is this what you stumbled across and decided to invest in?
Yeah, for sure. So I think a lot of people invest by focusing on themes. And right now, a big theme is AI um, and I think that can be really valuable if you think there's a really long growth window ahead of you in any specific area. Getting in early, finding a great company that can benefit from that is really positive. AI is a little tougher now because it's so oversaturated. So I'm always looking for themes that are undersaturated to some degree. And nicotine pouches is kind of ha was one of those themes, and I think it continues to be. Um, Mostly because I think you've seen this massive growth in Zins and all these other types of nicotine pouches. I think Tucker Carlson started his own nicotine pouch company, and others have as well. And the growth in the United States has just been astronomical. Um, and and what's cool about nicotine pouches specifically is that they're a much lower risk product than any other version of nicotine that's existed before. And it's existed for a while in Sweden, where as a result of the introduction of nicotine pouches, just the incidence of cancer as a result of nicotine has dropped off dramatically. The number of people smoking has dropped off dramatically. And I think now the World Health Organization kind of encourages countries to have a positive regulatory environment that favors nicotine pouches because of how um, risk reduced they are compared to the others.
And what is the name of this company in particular that you are investing in? And then what about it made you pay attention to it?
Yeah. So the name of the company is Hype, Haypp Group. They're based out of Sweden. And I met them at the Microcap Club conference in Vegas. Though at that point I'd already invested a small amount in the company. But as I got to know them better, I've invested more and more as I've had an opportunity to do so. And the reason for it is I think the company would be worth multiples of what it's worth today if it was trading outside of Sweden in this like second or third tier exchange. And that's kind of the perfect type of company that I look for, something that's just very overlooked. Um, and Hype fits that bucket. Two, it's got this amazing tailwind of nicotine pouch growth overall. And then three, since they focus on selling online, um, via e-commerce, they've also got an additional tailwind of saturation of online purchasers as nicotine pouch growth grows. So they've got the second lever. And then the third lever is since it's still a pretty nascent category in the US and some of their other growth markets, over time, people buy more and more. And so they've got this third multiplying lever to continue to increase growth. So I expect them to be able to actually grow faster than the general nicotine pouch market in the US as a result of those additional layers. Um, and furthermore, I think an example of this is, for instance, in Sweden, I think they have 30% of all nicotine pouches sold are sold online. And I think Hype is like 90% of that online market there. And in every market that they're in, they're the number one in their markets. So they're kind of the leader in the space. And that's something I really look for. And because they're the leader in the space, and because of the regulations and the difficulty in selling nicotine online, they tend to stay the leader and continue to accrete more and more value over time the longer they're in a market. And their margins tend to increase. Um, and then lastly, the way that they work, I don't know if you've ever studied Nick Sleep, but Nick Sleep focused on companies like Costco and Amazon that allowed, I think he called it, companies that had economies of scale shared, where as the company grows and the value that they're able to provide to both customers and their suppliers actually grows as well. So it's kind of a flywheel that everybody in that ecosystem wants them to grow. And that's also true for Hype in that as they grow, they're able to kind of continue to have low prices compared to retail stores, much lower. In Sweden, it's 20 to 30%. Here, it's 50% cheaper to buy online. And then two, because they're buying directly from these manufacturers in like British Tobacco, et cetera, instead of through a third party distributor, British Tobacco, et cetera, those companies also get a higher margin by selling to Hype. So they want more sales to go through Hype because they're making more money when selling to them versus to 7-Eleven.
Now, this is something that you can buy in the United States.
Yeah, it is listed on the, I think the NASDAQ or um, the exchange in Sweden, but it is, if you have Interactive Brokers or Schwab, you should be able to buy it.
And what's the ticker?
HAYPP.
Okay, so that's the ticker too. So, I mean, it's hard. Are there headwinds? Because nicotine, generally speaking, just like alcohol is kind of becoming now, it's like a no-no to talk about. I mean, we're not the moral police on whether you should or shouldn't use it, but do you find that that's a headwind when it comes to the success of a company in the United States, and or has it largely not been an issue?
Yeah, I think it's largely not been an issue. The reason for that is kind of multifold. One, I think one of the big learnings that people had in the nicotine space was from Juul and from what happened there, and in terms of uh, a lot of making the product appealing to younger demographics. And I think the companies have learned very well that you want to avoid that kind of that market in any way possible. And so they've gotten smarter around that. And just generally, it's less cool, right? This is not something when you have a nicotine pouch, you can't tell somebody has it in. It's not, it doesn't generally gravitate towards the younger demographic. The average is above 30, 35 for a user. Um, so there's that. And then two, nicotine generally has actually been pretty stable for the last 5 to 10 years. So I think there's been a move away from smoking, but onto other, um,
Mostly vaping, it
yeah,
seems like.
mostly
Yeah.
vaping, which is still more harmful than nicotine pouches.
And there's a lot of
And
government regulation moving into that space now too, because of the child aspect of it.
yep, exactly. And you can take that one step further. When we talk about government regulation, I think we've seen photos, one of my articles around the show, RFK Jr. using a Zyn. So that looks like it'll be fine for the next few years.
Right, right. So for investors who might be interested in getting involved in this, what do they need to know? I mean, when it comes to when they should buy and how long they should stay in.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think my philosophy is to buy things that are cheap 3 years out. And so I like to, for something that's growing quickly, I like to look out about 3 years and figure out what is the earnings power of a company like this. So what is earnings power? Earnings power in this case is how much could this company earn if they didn't spend all this money on growing more, right? And right now, when you look it up, it might show that it's a P of 70 or something along those lines, but that's because they're reinvesting all of their money into growing much faster in the United States and the UK. But when you take out those growth investments and you look at what this company could be earning based on its current growth trajectory, I think this trades at like a 7 times earnings power 3 years out. So very cheap for a company that's essentially a kind of monopoly or an oligopoly with a lot of tailwinds behind it.
Well, especially if it hasn't even really, because I haven't heard of it, and I go into gas stations all the time and you see everything behind the cash register. If it hasn't actualized its potential in the American market, that seems there's room to grow.
Oh yeah, I think we're very early. So you can kind of break down the growth in multiple levels. At the top, just the nicotine pouch market is growing like 35% a year as of last year at the low end. I think some companies grew 200% plus, like Turning Point Brands, which is the the parent company to Tucker Carlson's nicotine pouch company. And so that growth is really just accelerating, or not accelerating at the percentage level, but in total volume, it definitely is. And then you've
Perfect. Well,
got a very low penetration of online buyers because you can't market nicotine online, right? So it's difficult to market this. So most of the growth is through word of mouth when you realize, hey, this costs $8 at 7-Eleven. I can buy it for $3 online, and it's something that somebody might be using every day. They would do that all day. I like to say, I remember the times when I would travel abroad and I would have friends or family asking me to buy cartons of cigarettes to save like the 10% tax. And this is like that on steroids. So the word of mouth is really strong. And then I'll
perfect.
take that
Well,
one step further. Most recently, I think their user count in the US grew like 100% plus the last month that they reported it.
yeah. Well, I mean, the people who are going to use tobacco in the United States are going to use tobacco in the United States, regardless of anything else. And so if they can move into that market, then there's a ton of revenue there.
Yeah. And it's tobacco. So the other thing is it's tobacco free, and then it's also a higher margin business for the big tobacco companies. So if you start looking at what the tobacco companies are talking about, let's say British Tobacco or Philip Morris, they want to be mostly just selling these risk reduced products. They don't want to be the purveyors of cancer. And so they're actively pushing nicotine pouches and other risk reduced products in the effort to kind of get away from that, to reduce the health risks while also getting higher margins. So it's very positive for them and
Yeah,
the
how
general
they still
consumer
stay
that
in the
they.
money.
Yep.
Well, Mize, thank you so much. We're going to include your information in the description below for anybody who wants to follow you specifically, and also your 1 million to 100 million portfolio project, which this is a part of.
Yep.
So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.